Imagine a time when the gods walked among us, not as distant figures in the heavens, but as presences felt in the rustling leaves, the crashing waves, the crackling fire. This was life under the Norse pantheon, a time when every stone and stream held a spirit, every season a story. Life was harsh, yes, but it was also beautiful. Families huddled close in the long winters, sharing tales of gods and monsters, their bonds forged in the fires of tradition and shared heritage. These were not people obsessed with conquest, despite what history books might claim. They were farmers, fishers, craftspeople. They revered the land, understood its rhythms. This reverence was reflected in their gods, flawed and powerful beings who reflected the very cycles of nature itself. They were a mirror to the human condition, these gods, capable of great love and terrible wrath. Their stories were not confined to dusty scrolls or the pronouncements of priests. They lived and breathed in the hearts and minds of the people. Passed down through generations, they served as moral compasses, teaching lessons of courage, honor, and respect for the natural world. This was a faith woven into the very fabric of their existence, a vibrant tapestry of belief that connected them to their ancestors and to the land itself. Knowledge was power even then, but it wasn't hoarded by an elite few. It was etched into wood, carved onto stone, woven into tapestries. Runes, those enigmatic symbols, were more than just an alphabet. They were considered gifts from Odin, imbued with magic and meaning. They whispered secrets of the universe, offered guidance in times of trouble, and served as a bridge between the mortal realm and the divine. Then there were the sagas, those epic tales passed down through generations. Part history, part myth, they told of heroes and villains, monsters and gods. They weren't mere entertainment, they were lessons encoded in narrative, cautionary tales that taught the importance of bravery, cunning and loyalty. They were a way to preserve the past, to honor the deeds of ancestors, and to inspire future generations to live up to their legacy. These stories weren't static. They evolved with each retelling, shaped by the storyteller's voice and the listener's imagination. This ensured their relevance, their ability to resonate across generations. They were a living history, a testament to the power of oral tradition and the enduring strength of shared cultural memory. The Norse understood the power of a good story. They knew that knowledge, once woven into narrative, became more than mere facts. It became part of their collective soul, passed down like a flickering flame from one generation to the next. This was their legacy, a wealth of wisdom disguised as myth and legend, waiting to be deciphered by those who knew how to listen. The arrival of Christianity in Northern Europe was not a gentle breeze. It was a storm surge, shattering the old ways and leaving wreckage in its wake. Gone were the days of personal gods, of spirits inhabiting every rock and tree. In their place came a single distant deity, one who demanded absolute obedience and offered salvation through blind faith. It wasn't just a clash of beliefs, it was a clash of cultures. The old ways, organic and intertwined with nature, were deemed pagan, barbaric. Temples were razed, sacred groves cut down, ancient rituals forbidden. The Norse, a people accustomed to the tangible presence of their gods, were now asked to place their faith in an unseen entity, a god who resided in a distant heaven. This new faith arrived not just with missionaries bearing scriptures, but with soldiers bearing steel. Conversion by the sword was a brutal reality. Those who resisted were branded as heretics, their beliefs demonized, their culture suppressed. The whispers of the old gods were drowned out by the clang of church bells, the sagas replaced by the pronouncements of priests. It was a slow, painful process, this enforced conversion. Some embraced the new faith wholeheartedly, enticed by promises of salvation or cowed by threats of damnation. Others clung to the old ways in secret, keeping the flames of tradition alive in hidden hearths and whispered prayers. The Norse spirit, though wounded, was not yet broken. Section 4. A world overturned. The decline of the old ways. The imposition of Christianity had a profound impact on the social fabric of Northern Europe. The old ways, with their emphasis on community, kinship, and connection to nature, were replaced by a more hierarchical and centralized structure with the church at its head. The family unit, once the bedrock of Norse society, began to weaken as individuals were now defined more by their relationship with God than by their blood ties. The oral traditions that had sustained the Norse for centuries were also threatened. With the imposition of Latin as the language of learning and scripture, the rich tapestry of sagas and poems began to fade. Runes, once a source of wisdom and magic, were demonized as tools of the devil, their true meanings lost or misinterpreted. The loss of these traditions left a void in the hearts of the people. The old stories, once a source of comfort, guidance, and identity, were replaced by a dogma that often felt alien and remote. The connection to nature, once so central to the Norse worldview, was severed as forests were cleared for churches, and the rhythms of the seasons were replaced by the liturgical calendar. This cultural upheaval wasn't swift nor complete. Pockets of resistance remained, clinging to the old ways like embers in the ashes. But the damage was done. A way of life, a worldview, a spiritual heritage had been suppressed, driven underground by the relentless march of a new order. The consequences of this cultural and spiritual dispossession would reverberate for centuries to come. Section 5. Empty pews, emptier hearts, the waning of faith. Centuries passed. The grip of Christianity, once absolute, began to loosen. The Enlightenment, with its emphasis on reason and individual liberty, challenged the Church's authority. Scientific discoveries chipped away at the foundations of religious dogma. The Industrial Revolution, for all its progress, tore people from their ancestral lands, further weakening the bonds of tradition. Within the hallowed halls of churches, echoes replaced fervent prayers. The old stories, once so compelling, now seemed like quaint fables compared to the complexities of the modern world. The rise of secularism, the idea that life could be meaningful without religion, gained traction. People began to question the relevance of a faith that seemed increasingly out of touch with their lived experience. This decline wasn't simply about rejecting God, it was about a yearning for something more. The old certainties had crumbled, leaving behind a sense of spiritual emptiness. The moral compass provided by religion had lost its magnetic north, leaving many feeling adrift in a sea of uncertainty. This spiritual crisis wasn't limited to Europe, of course, but in a continent where the echoes of silenced gods still lingered, it took on a particular poignancy. The Norse spirit, though long suppressed, had never truly been extinguished. It lay dormant, awaiting the spark that would rekindle its ancient flame. Section 6. Adrift in the modern age, a continent unmoored. The decline of Christianity left a void, a spiritual vacuum that modernity struggled to fill. Consumerism offered distractions, not meaning. Materialism provided comfort, but not purpose. The old values of family, community, and connection to nature seemed lost in the relentless pursuit of progress. This spiritual malaise manifested in myriad ways. Broken families, fractured communities, a sense of rootlessness pervaded. The old stories, once a source of identity and belonging, had been forgotten, replaced by the shallow narratives of consumer culture. People searched for meaning in self-help books, New Age philosophies, anything to fill the void left by the receding tide of faith. This wasn't just a European phenomenon, of course, but in the land of the Vikings, the Goths, the Celts, it carried a particular weight. These were people whose ancestors had once lived in harmony with nature, whose gods had reflected the rhythms of the earth. Now they were adrift in a world of concrete and steel, alienated from their past and uncertain of their future. The old ways had been suppressed but not destroyed. Deep within the collective unconscious of Europe, the memories lingered, whispers of ancient forests, echoes of forgotten rituals, the faint thrum of a primal drumbeat. The time was ripe for a reawakening, a return to the roots that had nourished their ancestors for